All right, section 4.5. We're asked to factor all throughout this section. Our first example, we're going to factor 2s squared plus 9s plus 9. And I've put some things on the side here. Anytime you're asked to factor, you'll want to first check to see if there's a greatest common factor. In other words, can we take 2 out of everything? Can we take maybe an s out of everything? Maybe 5 out of everything, or 3? In this case, you got 2, 9, and 9. So number-wise, we can't take anything out of that. No factor in common there. And we can't take s out of everything because that last term, the 9, doesn't have an s in it. So right off the bat, we can go ahead and rule out the greatest common factor part. Next, we'll want to try to factor this into 2 parentheses if we've got a trinomial. And then a couple things that we'll know for sure. The first thing in both those parentheses has got to multiply to be this 2s squared. The nice thing about that is the only 2 things that can multiply to be 2 would be 2 and 1. And as far as the s squared goes, 2 things that multiply to be s squared would be s and s. So far we've got 2s as the first thing in the first parentheses and 1s as the first thing in the second parentheses. Next, maybe I should do this in green. The thing that goes second in both those parentheses has got to multiply to be this positive 9. And so on the side, I'd put 9 and then some factors of 9, 1 and 9, 3 and 3. That's all the factors of 9. Generally, you can pick the pair that multiplies to be 9 and also adds to be this middle term, 9 here. But since our coefficient for the s squared is not 1, we actually have to plug some things in, and we'll do what's called trial and error to solve this problem. And generally, I suggest starting with the pair that's the closest. And if that doesn't work, we'll move to the 1 and the 9. So I'm going to plug in the 3 and the 3. And we're going to multiply the inside and the outside. So 3 and 1 gives us 3s. On the outside, 2 and 3 gives us 9s. And that does add to what we want. Another thing that you can also, as far as things that we plug in initially, if you've got a plus and plus in your trinomial, you can go ahead and put plus and plus in your 2 parentheses. But that came out to 9s when we added the inside products and the outside products. So that means we factored it correctly. By the way, one last thing on this one, when you're entering this in the computer, typically we don't write things like 1s. So go ahead and leave the 1 off of your final answer there, and you'll just put s plus 3 for the second parentheses. All right, our second example, factor the trinomial 20c cubed minus 13c squared minus 15c. Again, we're asked to factor the trinomial. Anytime you see that word factor, you'll want to check to see if there's a greatest common factor. In this case, 20, 13, and 15, nothing in common number-wise, but hopefully you notice we've got a c in each one of those, so we can take out a c, and then we're going to rewrite. So take out that common factor. Let's do this in a different color. So c, and then we've got 20 when we're rewriting this, and we took out 1c, so that leaves 2 c's there. We took a c out of the middle term, so that leaves 13, and then 1c, and we took a c out of the last term, and that just leaves a 15. Next, we're going to try to factor that trinomial, just like we did before. Trinomial is going to factor into 2 parentheses, and we're going to plug in some things as best we know for sure. So again, the first thing in both these parentheses has got to multiply to be 20c squared. The 20 part, that could be a few different things. If I write on the side, I've got 20. That could be 1 and 20, 2 and 10. 3 doesn't go into 20, but 4 does, 4 and 5. And once you've come around on the other side, 4 to 5, then that's a comprehensive list. That's everything. And again, I generally suggest going with the pair that's the closest. So I'm going to go ahead and put the 4 and the 5 in. And also, we know we're going to have C and C to make the C squared. And next, we're going to want the two things on the end here to multiply to be negative 15. So on the side here, I'm going to write a list of factors for 15, and we'll figure out the signs after that. So 1 and 15, 2 doesn't go into 15, 3 does, 3 and 5, and then 4 doesn't, and then we're back up to 5 on the other side. So this is a comprehensive list again, and I suggest going with the pair that's the closest. Won't always be the case, but generally, percentage-wise, those are the ones that come up most often. So I'm going to go ahead and plug 3 and 5 in, and we'll see if that works. On the inside, those multiply to be 15C. On the outside, those multiply to be 20C. So that doesn't work. You could, depending on the signs, you could maybe add those to make 35, or maybe you could subtract them to make a version of 5. But not going to be able to make this middle term, which is what we're wanting to make, this negative 13C. So instead of moving on from 4 and 5 and 3 and 5, what I would suggest is just to swap the 3 and the 5. We could have put the 3 first and then the 5 over here. So or we could have put the 5 first rather, and then the 3 over here. So let's go ahead and erase. And then we'll put the 5 first, and then the 3. And I'm also going to erase these numbers down below. Okay, so now on the inside, the 5 and the 5, we've got 25C. On the outside, 4C and the 3. We've got 12C if we multiply those. And now we could make negative 13 out of this pair, but we need to make sure that the 25 is negative. Negative 25C, positive 12, that would give us negative 13C. So if we're going to make negative 25C, we need that 5 to be negative, so that it's negative 5 in the middle times the 5 in the middle. Negative 25. And if we're going to make positive 12C, then we need a positive 3. And one last thing on this one before I forget, this happens sometimes. If you take something out, you got to make sure you bring it along. You're not really doing anything with it as you're factoring, but you want to bring it along for the final answer. Third example, we've got 20V squared plus 73V plus 63. And we're asked to factor again. So we'll check to see if there's a greatest common factor. Can't take V out of everything this time. No V in the 63 there. And as far as the numbers go, 20, 73, and 63. You could try a few different things, but it doesn't look like anything's going to come out of all those. So go ahead and put a line through the GCF. Next up, it's a trinomial, which means it has 3 terms. So going to go ahead and put our 2 parentheses. Going to insert some things that we know for sure. Again, the first thing in that parentheses in both of them has got to multiply to be the 20V squared. The 20 part could be a couple things. That could be 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 3 doesn't go in, 4 and 5. That's our whole list. But we do know we got V and V up here to make the V squared. And I would suggest going with the 4 and the 5. We'll see if we can get that to work. Another thing we know for sure, we've got plus and plus up here in our trinomial. So we can just go ahead and fill in that part. of our parentheses with the pluses. And then the last two things here, those have to multiply to be the 63. So on the side here, I'd make a list of factors of 63, 1 and 63, of course. 2 doesn't go in, 3 does, 3 and 21. 4 doesn't go in, 5 doesn't go in, 6 doesn't, 7 does, 7 and 9. 8 doesn't, and then you're back up to 9 on the other side. So that's everything. And also I'd recommend going with the 7 and the 9. Then we're just going to check it. On the inside here, we've got 35V when you take the 7 times the 5V. On the outside, 4V and the 9. That gives you 36V. So if you add those, you can make 71V, but we're trying to make 73V. So that doesn't quite work. So we'll erase some of that. And instead of moving on from the 7 and the 9, let's just go ahead and swap those. So we'll put the 9 first and the 7 second. And then on the inside, we've got 45. On the outside, 4 times 7, we've got 28. And that does give us 73. Fourth example, factor 4b plus 6b squared minus 10. It does say factor in the instructions, so the first thing you'll want to check is if there's a greatest common factor. One thing I'll mention, though, something that comes up here even before we get to greatest common factor. The order of these is unusual compared to most of the ones that we factor. Typically, you'll want to put these in what's called descending order. Where we've got a b squared term, whatever's in front of it, and then a b term, whatever's in front of it, and then just a constant, maybe something like 10 or negative 10 there last. So b squared, b, and then the constant. This one is a little bit out of order. We've got the b term first, and we've got the b squared term second. So I would go ahead and swap these. We'll put the 6b squared first, and then positive 4b, and then negative 10. Make sure when you move these around that their signs stay the same. So the 6 is still positive, the 4 is still positive. And then we can go through our normal steps. Greatest common factor, this time, not going to be able to take b out of everything, but 6, 4, and 10 all have a common factor of 2. So let's take that out, and then we'll rewrite, or not, 6. So common factor of 2. And then if you take 2 out of 6, you've got 3. We didn't take any b's out, so we still have both of those. 2 out of the 4 leaves 2, and we didn't take any b's out. And then 2 out of 10 leaves a factor of 5. So got that part done. And then next, we want to try to factor that trinomial. And you're going to go ahead and bring the 2 down. Okay, so we got our common factor 2 taken out, and just a reminder, the first thing in both those parentheses has got to be the 3b squared. Nice thing about that, there's only one pair of numbers that multiply to make 3, and that's 3 and 1. And then to make the b squared, that's going to be b and b. Okay, and then for the second term in both those parentheses, that has to multiply to be negative 5. The nice thing about that, only got one pair of factors that make 5. That's going to be 1 and 5, and then we'll figure out the signs in just a minute. So on the inside, we'll want to do this check. On the inside, 1 times 1 is 1b. On the outside, 3b and 5 makes 15b. Here we're trying to add to make this middle term of 2b, but not going to be able to make 2b with 1 and 15. So like we've done before, just going to go ahead and swap the 1 and the 5. We'll put the 5 first, and then the 1 over here. So on the inside now, we've got 5 times 1, which is 5b. On the outside, we've got 3 times 1, which is 3b, and we can make positive 2b as long as this 5 is positive and the 3 is negative. So in order to make negative 3b, we need these outside ones to multiply to be negative 3. So got to put a minus in front of that 1. 3b times negative 1. And then put a plus in front of the 5 so that it's positive 5b. And that's it. Number 5, factor the following trinomial. We've got 8a squared minus 48 minus 20a. And I just want to, mention again, same thing that happened on the last problem. These are sort of out of order. You typically, when you're factoring a trinomial, you want the squared term first, maybe the a term second, and then the constant last, not the 20. Let's see here. The constant in this case would be the 48. So I would rearrange these. We're going to put the 20a in the middle since we typically have the a term in the middle. That way we got the square term first, a term, and then the constant. So now we've got 8a squared minus 20a minus 48. So rearranging a little bit at the start. Next, we want to check to see if there's a greatest common factor. In this case, there is. We can take, looks like 4 out of every single term here. And then we'll go ahead and rewrite these. 4 out of 8 is 2. Didn't take any a's out. 4 out of 20 is 5. Still got that one a there. And 4 out of 48 is 12. Next, we're going to try to factor this trinomial into 2 parentheses. Bring down the 4. Not doing anything with it, but it's got to come along. And the first thing in both of those is going to multiply to be the 2a squared. It's got to be 2 and 1, and a and a. Next, second two things has got to multiply to be negative 12. So on the side here, put some factors of 12. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And then that's the entire list. Like I recommended before, 3 and 4, the closest ones. And then we'll check this. On the inside, got 3 times 1 is 3a. On the outside, 2 times 4, which is 8a. And we are trying to get these to add to negative 5a, which we can do if the larger number, the 8, is negative. So to make the negative 8a, the 4 needs to be negative, and to make the 3a, that 3 needs to be positive. So these do now add to be negative 5a, and we factored correctly. And just remember, not going to put anything like 1a into the computer, just going to put a in, so leave that 1 off. Last example, factor the trinomial 20w cubed minus 39w squared plus 18w. No problems here as far as the order goes. We've got the highest to the lowest, the 3, 2, and then w to the first is last. So not going to need to rearrange this. So we're going to start with greatest common factor. In this case, 20, 39, and 18. Nothing in common there. Can't take 3 out of everything or 2 out of everything. But we can take a w out. So w, and then we'll rewrite the rest of this. Got 2 w's there. Took out 1 w in that middle term, and then took out 1 w from the 18w. Next, going to bring the w down and factor the trinomial into 2 parentheses. So first thing has to multiply to be the 20w squared. So we know we're going to have a w and w, although the 20 could be a few different things. 1 and 20, 2 and 10. 3 doesn't go into 20, but 4 does. 4 and 5. So go with the pair that's closest, 4 and 5. And then the last thing has to multiply to be this 18. So write some factors at 18, 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6, 4 doesn't go into 18, 5 doesn't, and then we're back up to 6 on the other side. So let's go ahead and go with the closest pair there, 2, 3 and 6, and we'll see if this works. On the inside, 3 and 5, we got 15W. On the outside, 4 and 6, we got 24W. Trying to make negative 39W, which luckily we can, as long as both of these are negative. Negative 15W, negative 24W does give us a negative 39W. So both of our signs up here need to be negative. And by the way, negative 3 and negative 6 does give us a positive 18. So it looks good.